Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by A. Yazawa. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nanapod. So we are picking up here in chapter 71. So we have the narration boxes that say, I didn't want to complain about Takumi always being busy. I felt lonely because Takumi didn't seem lonely at all when he wasn't with me. And now we're here in room 503 with Yuri, and she's like, here, say, heart, and she's feeding a chocolate to Nobu, and Nobu's like, and she's going for the mouth, and then she pops the chocolate in her own mouth with a gulp, and he's like, what the hell? And she's like, it's so yummy, heart, ooh. The skill of a master chocolatier, I could just melt. And he says, you got these for me just so you could eat them. She says, that's not true. I got some for Shin, too. Can he even have them? And Nobu takes a beat and says, I know. Why can't we see him? When are they going to let him out? It's been 2 weeks now. She says, and then he says, don't say it like that. And she's like, P.S., by the way, did you see Women Weekly? And he says, I don't read any of that crap. Which I feel that Nobu would not actually say it like that, if I'm being so for real. I bet it's nicer in the other translation. And she's like, they had a photo of the girl who got arrested with Shin. And Nobu says, what? What's she like? I gotta see this. And they open up the spread, and it looks like Rira. You know, it looks like her, except that the eyebrows are different. And she does look older. And it says, blast bassist boy, the mysterious face of the beautiful flight attendant, the bombshell easily mistaken for trap nest's Rira, a madam prostituting beautiful boys. And Hachi is reading Woman Weekly, and on the front it says, Nana announces she's going solo. And she looks, by turns, shocked and very angry. And the think boxes say, if I wasn't in public, I'd just scream. So that's the girl with Shin in the photo they bribed me with. It wasn't Rira. And she's like, he totally played me. And now here comes Karada, and he's like, I kept my word to you. And she turns around, and there he is. And he says, I deleted the photo and the story. Don't worry, it won't get published now. And she's thinking, Karada, and he's looking at her with like this smile, like, huh. And he says, that girl ran a website that was pretty much a prostitution ring. And Nana sets the magazine down, not saying anything. And she's thinking, he's stalking me again. And he says, she trained the boys and hooked them up with customers through her website. She's like, now what does he want? He's like, I think Shin's being interrogated about that too. And there's a stomp as she tries to leave. And he says, Nana, wait. Why aren't Nana and Ren living together? And she has the angry tick. And he says, if you tell me, she says, I'm not dealing with you ever again. Goodbye. And then walks away. And Karada sighs. And then we see a picture, and it's Nana's mother. And her hair is down, and she's walking with an umbrella in the snow. And he's like, well, I finally found out where Nana's mother ran off to. I mean, I know that Hachi would want to know this, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, we gotta stay away from this guy. He's a troublemaker. And she's thinking, I'm such an idiot. I really screwed up. I'm so pissed I want to scream. And she's stomping down. Um, I think it's to Jackson Hole. Yeah, Jackson Hole. And it says closed. And she's like, oh, they're not open yet. And then she goes flip, flip. And then she sighs. And she's remembering when Karada said, Takumi and Nana are celebrities, but you're just a nobody who thinks she's somebody. And the think boxes say, what should I do today? Should I cook a big fancy dinner? It's Valentine's Day, but will Takumi come home late again? Even though I'm here, when I think about Takumi staring at his smart, beautiful diva, and he's thinking about when Takumi was on the phone with Rira and said, you thought I didn't notice? And she's thinking, I want to scream again. And now we're back with Takumi and Rira because he took her box of chocolates, remember? And then he looks at the box and he looks at her and says, is it poisoned? And she says, no, like I'd ever. And he says, you can't stand me, and I don't think there's anything I should be thanked for. This is totally scary. But he puts the box like in his jacket pocket. And then he turns around and she kind of has just these very like, is that really what he thinks? And he's like, practice is about to start. And he grabs the door handle, but he stops because Rira has just kind of not launched herself across the room, but she has put her arms around him. And he says, Rira. And she hugs him tighter. And he says, let me go. But she hugs tighter. And he says, let go. And she says, no, I'm sick of acting tough. And then she just pulls him in real tight and squeezes him. And I don't think he looks resigned, but he definitely has like this, I guess this is kind of inevitable look on his face. Because he's thinking when she just said, at least you acknowledge my singing, Takumi. And when Hachi said, Rira dumped him to concentrate on her work. She has to be upset. God, you idiot, why don't you get it? And then when Yasu says, but to hear her say she's worthless if she's not singing, I didn't break up with her to hear her say things like that. And when Yasu also said, it's high time you did something about it. Because he knows that Rira is in love with him, and he's tried to just move it away and not deal with it. But that's because he hasn't gone to therapy. It's not even avoidant. You know what I mean? I think he just thought that maybe it would go away because he was like, oh, it's just like a childish crush, blah, blah, blah. No, bro. It's true love. And then he puts his arms up around her and he says, Rira, you're more important to me than anyone else. And now she's like startled crying. And he says, but would you really stoop to being just one of my ladies on the side? And he kind of looks like that took effort to get out of him. You know, like saying it out loud for the first time is just kind of like, okay, like I'm forging ahead even though I don't feel quite right about this. And then she pauses. And then she's clinging to him tighter. And then she kind of moves her head up because she was like buried in his chest. And she moves up towards his ear and says, yes, I would. And again, I know that everyone will be like, wow, that's really fucked up. Like he's married and all this stuff. But I stand by what I said last episode. It's unfinished business. It's unfinished business that needed to have been resolved years ago. Whatever the outcome. And now we're back in the think boxes that say, if I got pitted against that girl, there's no way I could win. Oh, but it's different, Hachi. Like, it's different. Because, like, Again, this is another reason why I like Takumi needs therapy, and then there needs to be like a polycule discussion because like Takumi feels safe when he's with Hachi. Um, she is incredibly steady, um, and also she's not afraid to call him out at the same time. Like they've had these really great conversations, where she's just actually herself, and she's like, "You're a fucking idiot," and he's like, "What the hell?" you know like she's kind of putting him in his place with like, "No, I'm not mad at you, angry faces on the food." you know um he has learned, I think, how to be more open and soft with Hachi. Um, and he's good for her too because he allows her to be exactly who she is, flighty and everything. Um, but he still has some stuff to learn, right? Because he still like has to be in control of everything. But with Rira, Rira is like Rira knows the other side of him, like the super business side, has known him for years, has seen him for day one, and in many, many ways, that is something that you can't replace. She's seen him in all of his iterations from day one. And that is its own type of safety, I think. So there's that as well. But I also do think that if Rira and Hachi were to meet, I think that they would get along extremely well. And even if they were like dating, if it was like a closed triad, I think it would be even good for Hachi and Rira as well, because then they would have the softer side and be able to kind of lean on each other when Takumi is being Takumi, or both telling his ass that he needs to stop being so aggressive and fucking fix it, you know. Um, it would be good, but that's not the story that we're telling. We can have all of the headcanons about it, we can have all the fan fiction, we can have all the shipping, but it's not the reality. The reality is monogamy. And what happens when you don't communicate or stay true to the partner that you have chosen. Even though Takumi, in the beginning was all like, "I'm a cheater, just so you know, I do these things." And it's like, okay, dude, but like, you don't let her do those things. Like, you don't let her have relationships outside of you. You don't let her have a relationship with Nobu. She's not allowed to have other guys. So it's uneven. So that's why it's shitty. Anyway, back in the think boxes. Hachi says, "It's not fair, Demon Lord." And then she's like, "But it's alright. Takumi's trying to help Rira and Shin get together." Which he is, but also Rira has made a decision that she doesn't know about. And then there's a ring of her phone, and she's thinking, but if Nana and Ren don't make up, and Ren is calling her, and she's like, "Oh." And then she answers the phone and says, "Hello, honey." And he says, "How you been doing?" And she says, "Good, heart. Better now that you called." It's so cute. And he says, "Don't give up no matter what happens. Life's about getting knocked down over and over, but still getting up each time." And she's like, "Huh?" And yeah, it's like, "Ren, what the hell are you talking about?" And he says, "If you keep standing up again, you win." And then she laughs and says, "That's exactly what Nana told me, heart." And then she's like, "Hee hee." And he's like, "Huh?" She stole my line. That's copyright infringement. And she's laughing. And she says, "Can you come over tonight?" And he says, "You gonna give me some chocolates, heart?" And she says, "No, God. Nana's place. I think she'll be back about 7 tonight." And he says, "Sorry, no can do." And then she kind of has like a pause and says, "Why not? You got work?" And he says, "You tell her that." And then Nana looks kind of worried. And she's like, "Are you mad? I'm sorry." And he says, "I'm not mad. Why should Hachiko apologize?" He's got like a sweat bead. And she says, "Then why won't you come get her? We've been waiting every day. Nana is, and I am." And he says, "I don't know why. I just don't feel like seeing her." And then Hachi has kind of like these blank eyes. And she's thinking about when Miyu says Nana's selfish. Ren can't do anything, and I'm sure it really stresses him out. And then there's like Ren kind of has like this realization, and he says, "Why are you crying?" And she says, "'Cause," and he says, "It doesn't mean we're through. I can't see her now 'cause I don't want things to end." And Hachi kind of stops, and he says, "It's like sometimes it's better if you let it lie for a while. You can see things more clearly." And she uh, kind of looks over to where the last time she saw Shoji standing. And when he said to her, "But now that I think about it, what you wanted wasn't asking too much." And then she says, "Hey, Ren, no matter what happens, there won't be anyone you love more than Nana, right?" And he takes a beat and says, "If there was, we wouldn't be in this mess." And then she smiles, and he says, "I promise I'll come fetch her one of these days. So please take care of Nana for me till then." Which, this is another relationship that I really, really wanted to see develop. Um, and I'm not really sure why. Like, I'll have to think about the reason why. It's it's something else that I think that Ren needs. Um, and I think it would also be good for Hachi to see the other side of things at the same time, so she doesn't put Nana on a pedestal. I think that would have been super important for her. Um, so yeah, I've actually been waiting for this moment in the manga to show up, because I was like, oh yeah, when they started developing their relationship um, outside of Nana, I think that was uh, very important, and I think was going to be very important for Ren in the long run. But anyway, the think boxes say, "I think Nana and Ren are actually too attached to each other," which is true. And now we are back with Takumi and Rira, and for the first time, Rira and Takumi are kissing. And then the think boxes say, "If they collide, they'll break." And then there's a knock knock at the door, and they both like pull away. There's like several panels of like they're kissing, and then they pull away, and she kind of like reaches up to touch his face, kind of almost like she can't believe what's happening. And he's got like his hand just like almost like a lifeline clutch in her hair, and then he like pulls her hand away from his face, and she's crying in that like, "I can't believe he's finally kissing me," like just all the emotions. And then he goes back to kiss her again, and then when the knock happens, they break apart, and there's a Rira, and she's like, "Yes," and it's her handler. And there's a creak of the door, and it says, "It's time for practice." And she's like, "Yeah," and she's shaking. And Takumi says, "I know, you didn't have to come get us." And she's like, "I'm sorry." And he says, "Mari, no chocolates for me." And she's like, "Go get some from your wife." And then Rira's in the corner just trying to pull herself together. And he says, "You're right. I have to finish up early and go home." And then Rira's got like this pause, and there's a slam of the door. And Mari says, Was Takumi yelling at you again? Your mascara." And she kind of looks over like, "What?" And then goes back to kind of trying to put herself back together. And thinks about when he says, but would you really stoop to just being one of my ladies on the side? And she says, it's all right. Let me fix my makeup and I'll be right there. And then there's a beep as Ren hangs up the phone with Hachi, and there's a stomp, stomp, stomp as Takumi is just flying down the hallway, looking probably the most unsettled that we have ever seen him look. He's clearly thinking about what just happened, and what to do about it, and also possibly chastising himself for giving in to these base urges. Except they're not based, it's unfinished business. So here we are. It's gonna get messy. And then here comes Ren's handler, and he's like, oh, there you are, Mr. Hanjo? Practice is about to start. And he says, I don't think so. Push it back half an hour. And the other guy's like, what? And then Ren goes after Takumi. And then there's a hey Nana. And then there's Nana here reading, it says Nana solo project. And it's Genpai, and he says, when you going to leave that apartment? It's about time you go back to Ren's place. You know the paparazzi will sniff that one out soon. And she says, hey Genpai, is it too late to accept that acting gig? And they look over at her, and Genpai's like, no way, if you want to do it, you gotta do it. And she says, then go call them. She says, I'll do it if they'll let me sing the theme song. And Genpai says, great, you're a good girl. And Fomosato says, but... And she says, what? I can act if I want to. I should do it. It's all about survival in this world. And then Fomosato just kind of has like this, not like empty-eyed look, but just uncertain, and like this feels a little fast. And then she's just pulls herself together and is like, you're right. And then the think boxes say, I'll go make dinner at apartment 707. I have to be with her at least. So please take care of Nana for me. She's thinking about what Ren said. I'd like to take a pause for a moment to reiterate the fact that, like, everyone who says this is doomed Yuri, you are not reading. You are clearly not reading this story. It is so much more complex than quote-unquote doomed Yuri, plus it's not a Yuri. Everyone just desperately wants these two to be together. And, like, in the first half of this manga, I would say, yeah, sure, I can see it. But now that we are here, this doesn't even look remotely like a romance anymore, or that it could be a potential romance between two women. This is literally one woman who is going to be taking care of another woman who is about to completely fall apart. And not in a romantic way. It's in essentially finding out that your best friend is incredibly flawed and not being able to let go. I mean, there is love, obviously, because you can love your friends, but it's not that type of romance. We have moved far afield. We have moved into a realm of almost like mother and daughter, or caretaker and sick patient. It's not the same, guys. Nowhere near Yuri. And now Hachi's thinking, Nana's late. She said she'd be home by 7. She's pulling a Takumi on me. And there's a flip of the lock. And then she's like, welcome home, honey, heart. And her little tail's going wag, wag, wag. And Nana says, you're still here? And she says, dinner's ready, heart. And Nana says, I ate at my meetings. I'm full. And Hachi looks so distressed. And she says, I can eat it tomorrow. And she's like, then I'll draw a bath. We can take a bath together, heart. I brought extra clothes too. And Nana says, you can go home. It's already 10. And then Hachi, there's a wilt over her head. And then Nana's like, oh, do what you want. And then she's like, then I will, heart. And then later in the bathtub, she's like, did something happen with Takumi? And there's like the dots, and she's like, no. And Nana's got like the little like circle blush lines with the sweat bead. And then Hachi looks like she's crying, but also like, I don't want to say, but I also can't hold back anymore. And then Nana's got like this, why doesn't she just say it? And then Hachi's like, he emailed me saying he's working late again today. He wasn't here for my birthday or Christmas, so he couldn't have at least come home for Valentine's Day. I wonder if it's really work. And Nana says, oh, that's right. I have to eat the cake. And then she gets out with a splash, and she's like, I worked hard today with that to look forward to. And then Hachi's kind of got like the huh? And then, oh, with a smile. And she's thinking, well, it's all right. I did make it for Nana. And then Nana's like, it's amazing, heart smack. And then Hachi's like, maybe I should live here with you again. And she's thinking, until Ren comes to get her. And then Nana's kind of got like this, well, I don't know if that's such a good idea. And then Hachi's like, well, that wouldn't work. And then Nana says, why don't you? And then Hachi looks up, and then she says, don't worry about your baby. I'll take care of you both. And then, Hachi, and again, I know I just had this whole thing about it not being Yuri, but remember, Hachi has an incredibly, like, fantastical brain. And she's like, is she proposing to me? Oh my god, Hachi, your brain. And then she's blushing, and then there's a ding dong, and Nana's like, who is it this late? Better not be paparazzi. And then Hachi says, maybe it's Ren. And she says, what? And she's like, 'cause it's Valentine's Day. And she's thinking, maybe he changed his mind. And Nana says, so what? Who is it? And then there's a, it's me. And there's a pause and a stop. And it's Yasu. And he comes in with, and there's a clack as Hachi sets down a teacup. And Nana says, what are you doing here? I don't have chocolates for you. And he's got like this look like, it's fine. And Hachi says, please have some, Yasu. I didn't make any for you 'cause you have Miyu, but I think it's really good. And he says, oh, thank you. Good thing I came over, 'cause she's giving him cake. And then Nana says, that's my cake. Don't eat it. And no one's listening to her because Hachi's like, but if Miyu left to go shoot on location today and would be gone for a while, do you miss her? And he says, yeah, but she got the role she wanted, so she's psyched. I'm happy for her. I don't think he says that in the real translation, because Miyu is not necessarily a person who gets psyched. I think she would be pleased, but not, psyched. Anyway, Nana says, so instead you go barging into some other girl's place? And he says, come back, Nana. And she looks up with him with kind of like this very stubborn, like, excuse me, look. And then he says, if you don't want to go back to Ren's place, at least move back to the dorms. It's not safe here, and everyone's worried. Remember that promise that Yasu made that he would stop, like, worrying about everybody and kind of doing the thing? He just can't help himself. He's gonna do it anyway, even though he's right, and this is a very dire situation. But maybe ever since Shin got arrested, he's like, yeah, fuck that. I need to go back to being vigilant again. And she says, but I want to make it on my own. Start over again. And then Hachi looks at her and has this thought, and she says, I get it. That's the main reason why Nana's staying here. And he says, I understand, but you can't just start over anymore. Do you really think you came this far all by yourself? And she's got like this really petulant look on her face, very stubborn. And then she says, no, I don't. That's why I don't want to be a burden and depend on you guys. And he says, making us worry is more of a burden. He does have a worried look on his face. He does have that, like, like this is just the truth. He's been more blunt lately, I feel. Like, just way, way more stern father than, like, helpful daddy. But I think that's because he's got Miyu now. Like, he can be a real dad now. Because he's got someone to be the counter mama. And then both girls have sweat beads, but Nana's got like this look, and Hachi kind of puts her hand on her arm, like, okay, calm down. And then he says, I'm taking you home when I finish my cake. The dorm room next to mine is still open. And then, Nana looks just very defeated and like, I wanted to do the thing. It's like, well, girl, you can't anymore. And then Hachi's thinking, I have to go home too. And she's like holding her stomach. And it says, to my husband who saved me, the me who can't do anything alone. It says, hey Nana, if you return to our apartment again, this time I'll really leave the house in Shirogane. Is it all right if I become a single mother? And we leave here with so Rira had written a note to Takumi, a very small one, and it says, I love you, signed Layla. And he burns it with his cigarette. And then he's kind of sitting in the studio, and he's sort of like put his head in his hands, like, I think I have done something wrong. And it's not that he's like burning the love that she's giving him. I think he's trying to burn away the evidence of what's about to occur between them, which I find really interesting because he doesn't seem to have any problems with telling Hachi, oh, by the way, I'm a player. But he does kind of keep it away from her at the same time. Like, when she was watching her soap operas, he had hooked up with one of those girls, but he didn't brag about it. He wasn't like, oh, hey, by the way, that's the girl that I totally fucked yesterday before I came home to you. He's able to have that separation and that kind of discernment, which is good because I think other guys would brag about it. But with Rira, it's different. I think it feels different for him. I think he's like, I gotta wipe away all traces. Not only for himself, but maybe also like paparazzi. Like, if the paparazzi got a hold of, a note like that and they found it in his possession, like, it would be really, really bad. So, even though that's probably just my read, he's probably in this moment not thinking about that. That would probably be something that later he'd be like, oh, thank God I burned that. Because that would have been bad if they had found that out. But yeah, maybe doesn't want to think too deeply about what's happening, even though he clearly is, but he doesn't want to at the same time. Man, so much therapy, so much therapy. Anyway, guys, that is the end of this chapter. Ooh, it's getting so messy. Anyway, thank you all for joining us, and us. Yes, us. Melissa's still here with me in spirit. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all not next month, but the month after. I'll see you guys in October. Good night.